Welcome to the final session in our supply chain automation pilot program. In this session, we're going to talk about revisiting your problem or your project that you're going to undertake after finding out everything you found out over the last 6 sessions. We're going to talk about the resources that you require, and then we're going to talk about building a business plan, including how you might go about funding that plan, and then presenting that plan to potential funders. So in this first subsession of this final session, we're going to talk about revisiting that problem and making sure really that we're covering off the right project for you in automating your supply chain. So if we go back to the first session, we started talking about how to go about finding the problem or the project that we wanted to undertake. But that was before we had gone through the remainder of the information, and we've seen what Jefferson had to say about different components of automation and different things that could be done. So it's worthwhile now if we take some time and we revisit the initial problem or project that we thought we were going to prioritize. We have much more information available. We have better information on costs. We have more information on costs, and we have different ideas. We probably have come across things that we didn't necessarily even know existed as options to automate within our supply chain, and different areas even within our supply chain to look at. We've also probably come up with a broader definition or a broader sense of what supply chain even means in our mind. And so all of a sudden we have a whole bunch more to potentially choose from. So at this point, it's worthwhile asking, was our initial project or problem that we wanted to solve, is that still the priority? And some of you watching this video probably know full well that that was the initial priority. It still is the initial priority. But some of you are probably sitting there realizing that there's maybe something else I could focus on. And maybe it's a lower hanging fruit and I could get some quicker gains out of it. So it is worthwhile to revisit the priority. So again, is the initial problem or project you came up with the priority? Perhaps you've already seen a couple of initial or quick solutions that could solve that, and you could actually move on very quickly to maybe a more significant project that you could undertake. So what are all the alternatives that you can look at, and which alternative might deliver you the most bang for the buck to begin with, while giving you a taste of automation in the supply chain? It's a question of what we want to look at first. Sometimes this is a little bit of a chicken and an egg kind of a question, but we want to look at resources we have available while we're revisiting this problem. And I think I've said it before, but looking at the problem or the project we're going to undertake is a bit of an iterative process. So we want to look at the resources. We want to look at internal resources, and we want to look at external resources. What I've seen in the past is a lot of people diving into these projects and becoming overwhelmed by the project because they really didn't have the internal resources available. And at the time that they initially undertook the project, they thought that they would use internal resources to save money on it. The truth be told is that oftentimes that ends up losing money, in the sense that you might miss out on opportunity through revenue. You might miss out on other areas. One of the things that becomes a major issue is the loss of focus on your day-to-day business operations. So I encourage you to do a really thorough mapping of the resources that you have available, and consider very strongly to use some external resources when they're available. Most vendors of any sort of software or hardware, whether it's a robotics or whether it's software as a service type of thing, most of those vendors will have training that can be available to you. A note on that training while I'm mentioning that is that most of the time the recommendations on training will probably fall short as to what you really ought to need. So I would always budget a little bit more for that training than what they're even necessarily saying. The other thing that you may want to consider as it relates to external resources is you may want to look at engineering firms to help you map out the processes that are involved, or other outside consultants to help you map out the process. If you do a little bit of extra work on planning these processes out, when you get to the actual implementation of them, you'll find they go a lot smoother. And again, I have to stress one more time that do not lose focus on your day-to-day business operations. This is particularly true in small enterprises with less than 10 or 20 people, where you'll pull from a variety of people to work on these implementation projects, and they have other tasks that are on the go. Somebody's doing this on the side of the desk might become a little bit cumbersome for them. So again, really clearly look at your internal resources, look at your external resources that are available to you that can help you with these kinds of projects. Then also you want to look at financial resources, and we'll get into this in greater detail later on. But you want to see how you're going to support this financially. Is that going to be cash flow? Is that going to be additional loans? How is that going to come together? Because you also don't want to be stressed from a cash perspective while you're implementing these things. You don't want to be stressed from a human resource standpoint or from any other kind of standpoint. Once you've gone through the different resources that you have and you've looked at the mapping of the resources, once you've had a really good conversation with yourself or your team about focus and the chance of losing that focus, you've reviewed all your different sources of potential help on these kinds of things, then I want you to consider revisiting that problem or that project one more time and really make sure that this is the right project for you to undertake at this point in time. And again, I've said it before, I encourage you, unless you're quite a large organization with lots of resources, to pick one project at a time as it relates to supply chain automation.